GDP. We hear people talking about it, anchors speaking about GDP in the televisions, and newspapers having long articles about GDP every now and then. But the question is that what actually a GDP is? Let's find out. GDP, gross domestic product, is a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods and services produced and sold in a year in a particular country. Let's understand it with a simple example. Let's say John is a farmer. And he has a farm of 1 acre. In this season he thought to grow wheat in it. He actually grew it to make it ready after 6 months. So, after 6 months, when wheat got ready, he harvested it and got 20 quintals of wheat, from which he stored 10 quintals for his family and rest of 10 quintals he sold to people. Now tell me one thing, that which bag of wheat will be counted in the GDP? The total wheat produced or the total wheat sold? Now in this case the GDP will be the value of that 10 quintals which was sold to people. Now there is an important thing to note. The GDP measures the value of final goods and services produced and sold in a particular time period. It is important to know that services for goodwill or which are voluntary and free goods are not the part of GDP, because nothing is sold in such cases. Let's look at another example. For instance, if a housemaid does your house chores, then her services are counted in GDP, because she is getting paid for it. But if you do the same things for yourself, then it will not be the part of GDP, because you are not getting paid. The next big thing about GDP is that it does not count the value of things being resold. Let's say if you bought a house some years ago and now you resell it, then it will not be counted in GDP. Now a question arises, how does a GDP is used? The measure of GDP is used by economists. If the GDP of a country is increasing, then the economy of that country is also increasing, and it is the same in the reverse case. Let's have a look at it further by splitting it into 2 cases. In the first case, when the GDP increases, so it has 2 scenarios. The first is when GDP increases for a few consecutive years, and the second is if it continues to grow. Now in the first case, production and consumption both grow, which shows that people can buy goods easily. But in the second case, the production and consumption both are increasing from long time, then there can be a risk of inflation, as the demand increases but supply is less. So, this problem is tackled by increasing the interest rates. So, people will pay more interest to banks and will decrease their expenses and ultimately demands, which will allow to balance production and consumption. So, GDP growth for short intervals of time period is good but not for long consecutive years. The second case is when GDP decreases. If the GDP continues to grow negatively, then this means there is a recession, and this problem is tackled by lowering the interest rates, which will ultimately balance the production and consumption rate and the number of debts on people. So, in this video, we learnt 2 main things. What is GDP, and how is it used to measure the economic growth of a country? Hope you found it informative. If so, then do not forget to like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching Nightingale.